Um, Rust remover, you can buy it at an automotive store, can't you? But I was thinking this earlier in this week how our God is a really awesome God. He takes us as we are, as we're broken, sinful, as we are without purpose or meaning in the world. And He gives us something that nobody else can give us, and He gives us a new lease on life. He brings meaning to things that are futile or pointless, doesn't He? There was this show on the History Channel I used to watch, and I liked it. It was called American Restoration. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but it featured this guy that restored broken things that were old, and his name was Rick Dale. And Rick would get these dusty, rusted, broken relics of times gone by, things that no longer had any form or function. They were junk, right? Found in the ground or in someone's attic. And he'd bring them back from this destroyed state to some type of perfection, even sometimes better than they originally were. Everything from old bikes to gumball machines, he would fix them. He would remove the crust and the grime, and he'd sand away the rust and he'd repaint the new items, and he changed the gears and the mechanisms. He did everything, And at the end, this trashed, unrecognizable piece of junk would be beautiful, it'd be functional, and it would be purposeful, and it would be a piece of art. It was, you just like to see that, right? Something that was lost is made new. And that's essentially what God does in each one of us. He takes us from a lost and decayed and ruined place, and He restores us. He restores our soul. He carves away the dirt and the grime. He polishes away the rust. And He restores us back to our beauty and our original purpose. And He gives us the ability to do good work in His name. Something else that I observed about that show on the History Channel with Rick Dale was that when people got their items back, they were always amazed, with what he had done with it. They were overjoyed to have their prized heirloom that had once been dusty and grimy and gross and broken back in like new condition. They treasured it. A lot of times people would cry because they had so much emotional attachment to this item. In much the same way, though, that those people that had been given this thing that was just a thing, God gives us so much more. We're being given such a wonderful treasure. What God has done in us is so much more fantastic than anything that we could ever get from Rick Dale or anybody else who does restorations. But they treasured what they were given, and so we should treasure what we have. Because it's a restoration that goes beyond the physical, but it's a restoration that is in the spiritual. And you can bet that Rick Dale's customers, they'd get their new items home and they would place it in a place of honor. They would treat it differently than they had before, right? They would probably treat it carefully and have appreciation for it. They treasure that special gift. And so we should as well. We should treasure the special gift that God has given each one of us, that new start on life, that new renewed spirit and body. We should also change the way that we treat ourselves, I think we have a tendency to put ourselves down sometimes. Or maybe we have a tendency to not do the right things by giving in to different temptations. And I think all of those evil things that are in the world that we allow in our lives, that's a little bit of rust here and there. That's a little bit of grime. That's a little bit of dust. It's a little bit of imperfection, a little bit of a seized mechanism here and there. We've been given a precious gift, something more precious than we can even imagine. something that required that Jesus Christ himself, the Son of God, would have to give to us through his death on the cross. And we can't take that gift for granted. We have to treat it with special honor. We have to treat it with special honor, not in just recognizing it for what it is, but recognizing what it means for us and how we should change our life. We should cherish the opportunity that God has given us to start new, to start refreshed. Can you imagine some of the customers of Rick Dale if they took this beautiful thing that they just spent thousands of dollars on, sometimes $20,000 or $30,000 having restored, and they just dropped it on the ground in his dirt driveway and started dragging it across the ground, and it was getting all scarred up and ripped up the paint, and they just treated it like garbage, getting their heel into it and just grinding it into the dirt. But a lot of times, just because we can't see it, we sometimes do that same kind of thing with the gift that God gives us. That's what we do. What we do with God's gift when we sin. We're taking that something beautiful that he made in us and we're kind of grinding it in the dirt. We're not the only people that have ever done that, of course, right? There's a lot of folks over the years that have done that. And even in the time of the early church, the first century church, there was people that had to be reminded to treat their gift from God with respect. And that is where we find ourselves this morning with this passage, Ephesians 4:17 through 24. These folks need to be reminded to treat their gift with respect, to treat it with the respect that it deserved. And this is what Paul, the apostle, said to these guys. He said, "So this I say and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart. And they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity, with greediness. But you did not learn Christ in this way, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught in him, just as the truth is in Jesus, that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and put on the new self, which is in the likeness of God, has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth." So this passage, it was written by the Apostle Paul to remind these folks about the value of what they'd been given, that it was something special, and that they should not go back to living the way that they had lived before, that they should not adopt the practices of those who were living in sin. The Gentiles walk as the Gentiles also walk, he says. That special gift that God gave them was not to be wasted and not to be thrown in the trash like so much junk, but instead each one was given a new hope and a new opportunity for something better, to walk away from the past and to strive confidently into the future. It's an opportunity to leave behind the sin and the baggage of our old life and become renewed, to become changed, to become enlightened by God, and to receive a new and better life. These folks were the cast-offs, and God made them vessels of honor fit for a righteous purpose. Now, if you're a vessel of honor fit for a righteous purpose, fit for service to God, then you don't use that vessel to go get water and drink it out of the toilet. You know what I mean? That's what he's saying. It's not for that. Paul's conclusion for how we should act is, given our new restoration, is this. He says, "And that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and you put on the new self, which is in the likeness of God, has been created in righteousness and holiness of the truth. So how do we do that anyway? So that's the question everybody always asks, right? So what am I supposed to do now, right? How do we experience this gift and renewal from God? How do we do that? And that's what really the passage is about primarily, right? That's what the rest of it is. Paul begins the passage by calling upon his source of authority, right? He says, "So this I say and affirm together with the Lord." He and the Lord are one in this statement, right? I say and affirm this together with the Lord. So from Paul's lips to our ears is like from God's lips to our ears, is essentially what he's saying, right? He's saying this comes straight from God about what you need to do. Paul's first admonition from God to the Ephesians is that they have to leave behind their past life, their sin, to no longer walk the way that the Gentiles walk, to not walk in their futility and their pointlessness and their meaninglessness, right? Because think for a moment about this, about your faith, about your life in Jesus Christ. Think about how precious that is, and then think about what meaning is there without God. What meaning in life is there without God? Every one of us without God, if we don't have God in our life, if we don't have His meaning and purpose for our life, to aspire to something greater than ourselves, then we are essentially living a nihilistic life. And even if we are in denial, we're still living a denialistic, nihilistic life. Does that make sense? Anyway, but what is the true meaning of life without a redemptive and personal God? What is it? Aren't we just a cluster of cells? Aren't we without purpose or meaning? Isn't our only point to consume other things and then to die and be consumed ourselves? There's no calling or purpose or point to life without the meaning given to us by an all-powerful and loving God who made us in His own image. Everything else compared to that, everything else in measurement to that is really pointless. It's corrupted. It's broken, right? Like the thing in the attic or out in the dirt that is no longer filling its purpose or meaning that it is without it, right? It has nothing. It's futile. It's just junk. I think that we know that, right? I mean, people have known that for a long time. If you read the Old Testament, Solomon, says all things are vanity because he's right, isn't he? And if you think about it, everything is vanity to someone that does not have God. When we take some time to think about our innermost being in the quietest moments of introspection in our life, we know that this isn't all there is, what's in front of us. We know that there's something beyond this, don't we? We know. And people have known since the beginning of time. Some of the oldest structures. I saw this documentary the other day. Before people figured out how to farm effectively, like massive farms that created cities, they said hunter-gatherer groups were building temples to things that were higher than themselves, even then, thousands of years ago. It is hard to imagine. We have it encoded in our very DNA that there is a spiritualness to us, that there is something beyond us, right? Knowing that is there and it is part of who we are, what fulfillment can we really get from just regular mundane life? That's a question we got to ask ourselves. What real pleasure comes from greed, right? Being greedy, or being selfish, or being a narcissist? What real pleasure comes from being petty and unforgiving? What real pleasure comes from indulging ourselves or indulgences, right? They might feed our lust, But they only ever create a greater and more permanent emptiness at the core of who we are. It's nihilism, it's denialism of what we truly are and what we're truly meant to be, right? These excesses and these sins, these things that attract us, the greed, the selfishness, all of those things, they hold themselves out as some kind of answer or type of truth. But in reality, they are a lie. They are a farce. There is only one truth. They are an empty and rotten lie. Yet, as Paul says, so many people, they sell their souls to a lie because they are in the darkness. They are darkened in their understanding. You know, John, the Apostle John said, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't understand it. Well, he's saying basically the same thing. We're blinded by the sin, by the evil itself. Much as an addict fixates on a drug, even though they know it could potentially kill them. You know, when I was an investigator for the Department of Health and Human Services, I worked in Manchester some, and there was usually a heroin or a fentanyl death almost every single day. And something that I heard from a police officer that was particularly disturbing to me was that when somebody would find out, well, that person died over in that part of town, well, then all of the other addicts would go and try to find that dealer because they had the best stuff. Can you believe that? They were seeking it out because, well, if it was good enough to kill them, they would get super high. Can you see how sin and evil, it blinds us, it puts us in the dark, and we can't even see things that make sense? Don't you see the insanity in that? The mindless obedience to the evil, the bowing down to it, why it is so hard for somebody that is addicted to break that addiction. And then we need to ask ourselves then, why is it so hard to believe that any sin or any vice in your life, whatever that might be any different than that? And then you see the reason why Paul is reminding the Ephesians why they have to change, why they have to leave that stuff behind, why they have to cut it out of their life, why they have to step away from it, why they have to go and embrace that greater purpose. Because sin ensnares us all. It traps us all. It blinds us so that we run headlong, screaming towards our deaths, thinking that we're running into ecstasy of our sin. It's unbelievable. But all sin works that way. And he says it works that way because people become ignorant. And they are ignorant because they have hardened hearts. That those hard hearts are calloused over by marinating in that sin all the time and in every day and in everything in their life. They just sit in that sin and they no longer see it as a sin anymore. And their minds change and twist and become racked by that sin so that they believe the sin is good and that good is evil. And you know, that's another passage I'd like to share with you. In Romans 1:28 through 32, he says, "And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer," when they lost their connection with God, when they lost their true meaning and their purpose for life, when they lost the most important thing that a person can have, when they lost that, he says, when they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to their parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Give hearty approval to those who practice them. That's what sin does to us. It blinds us to the righteousness and the goodness of God. It makes it impossible for us to see. It calluses us over the more that we do it, and we become ensnared and trapped by it, just like those addicts who were looking for a high because the good stuff killed some people, but they didn't think they were going to die. But somebody died every day. You know, that's not how a Christian is supposed to live, right? So Paul's giving them a wake-up call. Hey guys, don't do that. Leave behind that evil life. This is not what we were taught about when we learned about Jesus. And if you are a Christian, you have to leave behind the depravity. You have to leave behind the twisted thinking, the sin and the evil. And that their new life in Jesus Christ is an opportunity to be cleansed, to be restored, to be made new again, to transform our minds and be renewed and refreshed in the wisdom and the light of our glorious God. A Christian must, for their own sake and for God's glory, stand against sin. And not just some sins, but all sins, especially in these days, especially moral impurity. Moral impurities are the most sinister. You know why? Because back then they were bad, and they're bad now because they're permitted by the law, right? So they're not against the law usually. It's okay to practice sexual immorality, to practice greed and avarice, to be selfish. None of those things are against the law, right? But they are the most sinister and evil because they are culturally accepted. Our society accepts them. It says it's fine, even that it's good. But the Bible teaches us that it is not. And I think on a basic level, we know in our heart of hearts and our soul of soul that those sexual improprieties and all of those sins, those are not good for us. Those damage us to our core. They hurt us. They ruin who we are as servants of God. That evil and that lust is strengthened, though, by not only by permission from our society, but also because of the deceit that it carries inherently within itself. Satan uses it to ensnare us. You know, we desire intimacy, don't we? Every person wants to be loved and wants to love, don't they? And that desire is corrupted by the excesses of pornography on the internet, right? There's tons of it out there. But it says, oh, you need intimacy? Well, let me give you some intimacy. But is that real intimacy? Is that real? What about all types of other sexual immorality, like try before you buy, and all this other kind of stuff? The basic feeling is good, right? The intimacy is good. But the other things that go along with it are perverted and twisted and evil and ruin us, who we are. They become addicted. People become addicted to these things. We desire food, right? Here's a rough one on me. That desire is good to eat, but it becomes corrupted with excess, does it not? It does, right? It dominates us. One of the hardest things to do is to lose weight. Anybody who tries to lose weight, and I mean more than like 10 pounds, All you people that think you don't take good pictures and you're like this big around, It's rough when you have to lose a lot of weight, right? It's hard to do because you're giving up something that you really like and enjoy because it has gotten and wormed its way into your mind that it's good, and it's not. It's not good. But Satan uses that desire in you, and he twists it. And he says, and he turns it bad. He turns it to something evil that traps you and ensnares you, I kind of think of it like this. How many people know what an alligator snapping turtle is? It's a weird animal, right? I mean, you don't see one of those every day. They don't live around here. We have regular snapping turtles, but they're not quite as cool as this thing. Well, they're gigantic, massive beasts. They are the size of like a dinner table or something. I don't know. They're huge. They weigh, I think like up to 100 pounds or something crazy like that. And I would never want to go near one, but they're the ones that, can snap broom handles in half and that with their beaks. Anyway, they're really slow, and they're massive, and they eat fish. What are fish? Are fish slow? They aren't, are they? They're wicked fast, right? So how does this big, lumbering, giant beast eat fish so that it gets so huge? And why is it a successful animal? Because it doesn't hunt by chasing things down. It deceives the little fish. He opens up his gaping face, his maw, right? And his tongue looks like a little baby worm, And it jiggles. It jiggles like this. And the fish are hungry. And they're like, oh, I'm hungry. I want some food. And then the savages are like, you're dead, immediately. That's what Satan does to us. He says, it's food. Hey, come and eat it. And then he's like, right? That's what he's doing in our life. He attracts us with intimacy, and he gives us pornography and sexual immorality. And you think that you're being satisfied, but in reality, you are being enslaved to it. He attracts us with Oreo cookies, and we're being enslaved to them, like excess, too many calories, right? He attracts us with things that we want and things that are good, but then he gives us the garbage. That's what he does. And that's what that passage is about, what Paul is saying, that you're being darkened, they're darkened in their understanding, they're calloused, they're marinating in these sins because they can't know any better. They don't know any better. They're just out of it. They're blind by the evil, right? When true happiness really is only from the things that come from God. It's only found in hope and restoration and renewal. Happiness is found in meaning and in purpose. Our real fulfillment is, what comes after this life. It's not in drugs. It's not in any of that kind of stuff. Those are only thieves of one's life and one's joy. They take away precious good things. What does drug addiction do to a person? It consumes them, their whole life. They fixate on it. They look for places to get drugs where people died because they think it's better. You get more high. Sins all lie and deceive. They are fool's gold. They look shiny and attractive, but ultimately they're not worth anything. And they ruin your life. Really, if you want true happiness, real fulfillment and purpose, there's no place to get those things other than from God. And as a Christian, you know that working towards something every day you live that is everlasting and that has purpose, that's real. That's worth it, right? Every choice, every action that we make, it has meaning. There is nothing in our life that we just should throw away. Every moment is an opportunity. And I know that's easy to say, but we all have opportunities to grow every day. And it is consequential to our life when we take those opportunities. There's another passage I want to share with you that Jesus is basically talking about how we should spend our opportunities that he gives us. And that's from Matthew 6:19 through 23. He says, Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures where? In heaven, right? In heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in or steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And then he goes on to say, the eye is the lamp of the body. So then, if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? How great is that darkness? If your life is clouded and blinded, if you're blinded by your sin, how can you have any light in you anymore? It twists you, it controls you, it takes your joy, it drives you away from God, it puts a separation between us and God. I took us here to remind us that we should not waste our life on foolishness, on foolish things, to store up for ourselves heavenly treasures, to work towards a meaningful and purposeful goal in our life, to work towards everlasting life, the things that truly matter to us on a spiritual level. Things that really have great, powerful meaning, things where we can make good change in our lives. We should be investing in the things that last forever. You're probably looking for some examples of how to do that. And they're all over the Bible. And we talked about some of them this morning, actually. But to worship God with our whole life, our whole being. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your mind and your soul. And then the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are spiritual goals. To love and care about people, to bear each other's burdens, to be there when people need us, to work hard, right? Work hard so that we can share with others who may have need, to be an encourager to each other, to do the good things, to do the right things in life, to show kindness to people, to have a gentle and giving spirit, and to be an ambassador for Christ. Those are things that we should be focusing on. To help the sick, the orphan, right? The widow, all those things. Those things which are virtuous and good and help people, to build people up and not tear them down. That's what Jesus was all about. That's what he did. That's what he was always working towards, to bring people together, to unite them under God and his righteousness. To bring people to love, right? That's how he said you should know. People will know that you're my disciples and that you love one another, even as I have loved you, right? That's his new commandment I give to you. That's big. How much love do we give to each other every day? How much love are we giving away? You think about all of the other things, the sins, the wrong things that we might be doing in our life. Well, how much love are we giving away? How much treasure in heaven are we storing up? How much spiritual fulfillment and righteousness are we walking in our daily lives? Those are things that we should ask ourselves. Are we doing what God designed us for? Are we living according to his purpose? Is that the point of our life? Is the point of our life and the point that God made us for? Are those two things in alignment? Because Jesus says as long as we're walking in the light, then we're full of light, right? Our eyes are clear and we can see more clearly. And that's true. If you do not watch anything but G-rated movies, and even that can be sketchy nowadays, but you don't do it for a few months or something, for a while. Only watch G-rated things. It's easier if you have a 4 and a 5-year-old. Obviously, you just let them pick what they want. But and then watch something that is extremely offensive, and sit there with your kid maybe and watch it. Don't do that really, but imagine that they were sitting there next to you, and you saw this swear word or this inappropriate scene, or that you'd be covering their eyes, right? We become desensitized to the evil. We become desensitized to the wickedness. We have to be sensitive to it. I'm not telling you to go home and get rid of all your PGs, That's not what I'm doing. What I want you to do is to be sensitive to the evil. There's a lot of evil in the world, and it is corrupting us all the time. It's trying to blind us to what God wants for us in our life. And we have to stay focused on the goal. We have to store up treasure in heaven. We have to walk in the light. We have to live as servants of Jesus Christ and love each other. That's what the Bible's about, right? Changing who we are on a fundamental level, to no longer be conformed to be of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind, to be a holy and living sacrifice. That's what Romans 12, right? That's what we need to do. That's what we need to be. We can't be drawn in by the evils that are in the world, to be corrupted by them. We need to set ourselves apart from them, to no longer, we're in the world but not of the world, right? That's what the Bible is about. It's about changing and becoming something new. Like the butterfly, right? The little caterpillar, he like rolls up in the cocoon and then he comes out a butterfly. He's beautiful. He's changed. He's something new. That's us, right? We come out of that cocoon and we're something new when we're baptized. And we should be trying to focus on the good and the righteous things in life and trying to reduce the evil and become sensitive to the evil. I'm not going to tell you what you should watch on television. That is not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to get to, the point I'm trying to make, is that we have to be sensitive to the good and the evil and recognize it for what it is. Because Hollywood, all these people in the world, they don't care about God, right? They don't. And they're trying to change who you are fundamentally as a person and get you to accept things that are evil in the sight of the Lord. And you have to be aware of that. And if you're not aware of that and you're not sensitive to that, then you're going to be fooled, just like the turtle, right, with the worm. And then when you are fooled, then you're ensnared, and then he has you, right? So we need to be sensitive to that stuff. That's all I'm saying. So God, he gave us each a renewed purpose and an opportunity when he rescued each one of us from the darkness, when he wiped away our sins. God rubbed away our dirt and our grime, and he polished up our rust, and he restored us back to new, and he made us for an intended purpose. And it is time that we live in that purpose today. It's time that we seize that purpose that he gave us, right? He prepared us for good works so that we should walk in them, right? God gave us the life of his own son, Jesus Christ, in order to make that happen, to give us that opportunity to come out as a butterfly. Something had to be sacrificed for that to happen, and that's what happened. That was an awesome sacrifice to fix and restore us back to our factory reset, right? And now that we've been restored, it is up to each of us not to squander that gift, right? That was Paul's message to the Ephesians. Don't waste your time and opportunity. Don't go back to the way that you were before. We need to live for our good and meaningful purpose. We have an everlasting goal and future with God, and it is time to act in accordance with that purpose and with that belief. And we cannot be fooled and dissuaded by the forces of darkness that are all around us. And we cannot allow false promises and things that pretend to satiate different desires in our life. We can't allow those things to consume us. And it is time to fill our life with light and walk in the footsteps of Jesus and follow him all the way up the narrow way and into eternal life. That's what it's time for. And at this time, I want to offer an invitation if anybody wants to come forward for any reason, if they want to give their life to Jesus Christ today, become a Christian, to become renewed, restored, be made new, and they believe in him with their heart, mind, and soul, and they're willing to repent and change, transform, and they're willing to be baptized in commitment to him, then they can have forgiveness of those sins, the gift of the Holy Spirit of God, and eternal life. I want to encourage you to come forward as we stand and we sing. Tomorrow